You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 on Instagram and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Jordan Strokovsky, founder of Strokovsky LLC, Philadelphia trial attorney, hungry for exceptional results that his seriously injured clients deserve. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good evening.
Good
How are
evening.
you?
So before we get going, I just want to do a little shout out to our sponsor, Lex Reception, and tell you a little bit about them. They answer all your calls and messages in real time to appointment scheduling. Your clients are going to receive the care and support they need with Lex Reception. Their legal answering specialists are on hand 24/7, so you'll never miss a call or a future case. With custom scripting and software that can seamlessly integrate with your current workflow, Lex will make sure every potential client gets fantastic service from the first call. Hit us up, Lawyer Stories, if you're interested. We can save you $250 in the first month using Lex Reception. Jordan, back to you. So how are things in Philly? Like, tell us about are you a big Rocky fan or what?
I'm a huge Rocky fan, actually,
Nice.
but things are busy in Philly. I actually, you know what? In my house, I actually have a Rocky poster
Really?
that I've had since I was a child. I never thought it would actually make it to my house.
Yep.
And I don't think my wife ever thought that, but it actually it fits pretty well, surprisingly.
You got a little corner to put it up in. That's good.
Yeah, yeah.
Are you a
His
Philly
whole life
guy?
was a million to one shot.
What's that?
His whole life was a million to one shot. That's
That's
Rocky.
right. That's right. Are you a Philly guy? Is that where you're from originally?
So I'm originally from outside Harrisburg, PA. So that's central
Harrisburg.
Pennsylvania.
Okay.
So that's about 2 hours from Philly. It's a distinctly different culture and vibe. But my dad grew up in Philly and
Gotcha.
had grandparents in Philly. So Philly to me was always the big city to me. So I've always had roots there. And then basically once I started college, I've essentially been in Philly ever since, except for, a short stint in New York.
Gotcha. Had to get that short stint in New York. I got you. Yeah, that's a great place to be. So we'll go through your story, but I want to just kick it off and say like you have an amazing LinkedIn presence. And you posted about a week ago about opening your firm 4 years out of law school, and like you got a lot of good engagement. So there's kind of a story behind it. Like you told your boss, you had a pretty good job, and you talked to your boss, and you were like, okay, like I'm gonna launch my own firm. Like, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So I'm a catastrophic injury lawyer in Philadelphia.
Hmm.
That's the type of work I've always wanted to do. It's the type of work I've always done. And yeah, I was an associate for 4 years and I didn't have any real trial experience. Nonetheless, I just had this feeling basically, that was growing for 4 years, and especially the last few months before I made the leap to start my own firm, that just like I can do this. Um, and I did it basically. So
Yeah.
I had the knowledge, or I had a fair amount of knowledge. I thought I was doing really well. The cases that I had, I thought I was getting really good results on and really making things happen. Surely there were a ton of things, especially in the catastrophic injury space, that I wasn't exposed to, but I felt confident that I was at the level where I at least knew what I didn't know. And I was
Right.
confident I could figure it out and learn it along the way. And
Interesting.
fortunately it's worked out so far.
Interesting. So like looking back, like what was the most important thing about being ready to launch your own firm? And maybe it was knowing what you didn't know.
Sure. I mean, that's a tough question. I'll say for me, like, I just had a feeling like that I had to do it.
Okay.
It was almost like a burning sensation
Burning
inside
Fire?
of me. It's like
Like,
literally, I know it sounds corny, but I literally felt
well, no,
that.
that's a Rocky
Like,
song, right? Like, no,
oh
Hearts on
yeah.
Fire. Heart on Fire.
Oh, Rocky Four.
That
Yeah,
used to be like
yeah,
the second song on my,
yeah.
it wasn't an iPad, it was actually a iPod. Wait, yes. Do you remember an iPod? You probably don't even remember an iPod.
Yeah, yeah. No, I remember, of
All right,
course.
all right, all right. So
Um,
yeah, okay, that's awesome. Heart on Fire.
and I just had this feeling that if I don't do this, I'm just gonna regret it. I
Yeah,
just felt like the time was now. Now, don't get me wrong, you need to have confidence, you need to have some knowledge. I don't want people thinking like, oh, you can just go out on your own and start working on 8-figure cases and get great results with zero knowledge. Like you have to have some foundation. And I had a few cases too to take with me, so that obviously didn't hurt.
right.
But I basically had no money. I started off with like a very limited amount of money, and
Yep.
then I didn't expect that I would have to pay my old firm back the case costs like immediately. So I had to do that. So I had a lot less money.
Yeah. Wow.
And I guess there was a concern. I had a slight concern. Like I wasn't sure how insurance carriers or defendants were going to react. Like, are they going to know, oh, he's a new solo, probably has no money. Let's just, wait it out. He'll go bust, he'll run out of
Right.
money.
Right.
And I actually surprisingly, back then at least, I thought they were huge hits. Like I got some pretty sizable policy limit tenders, relatively soon after I
Right.
started my firm. And I was like, oh, this isn't so bad.
Yeah.
And I was able to take an afternoon off and go celebrate with my referral attorney and
There you
hang
go.
out and get a drink or a seafood tower. And I was like, oh, this is the life.
So like,
Uh,
wait. So that's a good question. That actually is something I've wondered about. Do the insurance carriers like look at the name of the firm on the the demand or whatever and say, oh, like that's that huge firm. Like you know how you see in the commercial, like tell them so and so sent you, and like they got the letterhead. It's a huge, well-known firm, and maybe they give you like the limits, or then they see maybe something comes in and they see like a lesser known firm, like a solo. Do you think that they look at something like that, or are they actually looking at like the merits?
it's probably a combination of both.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe early on, insurance adjuster just randomly put me in the good pile. I wasn't
Okay.
sure, but I've been fortunate. So um, I think insurance carriers and defendants or defense counsel, like they do take into consideration the reputation and skill of the other side. And that's not to say if you're a new attorney that, oh, I can't do it then because nobody's gonna give me the benefit of the doubt. It just means you gotta put the work in. But
But you know what? Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, but even if you have no name, if you're good at what you do, you'll get the result.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm thinking, even if they see, like, maybe I don't, not that they know that somebody's a young attorney or whatever, but some of these younger attorneys or newer attorneys out there by themselves, they might be like hungry, like they don't
Exactly.
want to just settle. Like they're thinking like this guy's gonna take us to court. We're gonna have to pay like all this money and like fees and this and that. They might be thinking that rather than like a bigger firm who has like this they have like their not algorithm, but they have their system, for what they're gonna pay and where they're gonna limit themselves.
Absolutely. I think hunger and just, you do your job, you do it right, you'll get the result. You'll outperform the oldest cat or the best name in the market if you're willing to put the work in. Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Speaking of hunger, you mentioned a seafood tower earlier. That sounds pretty good. Okay,
Yeah.
so tell me, like on that note, like what advice can you give to an attorney ready to hang a shingle and go out on their own?
If you're truly ready, you just got to do it. There's never going to be a perfect time. Essentially, you just got to do it. And if you're people, I hear stories of people say, "Oh, I wonder if I should do this," and they don't end up doing it. And
Right.
for the longest time, I'm like, "Wow, they're missing out," or why don't you just do it? But I think the reality is, I mean, it's super hard having your own practice. I love it. I mean, I have a very fulfilling career and I love what I do. I'm very passionate about it. I just love practicing law and I feel like having my own firm with that autonomy allows me to practice law to at my best ability,
Mhm.
but it's not for everybody. And if you think you might want to do it, but you just don't do it, maybe don't beat yourself up about it because it just wasn't meant to be. But if you truly feel like I need to do this, you just got to do it. You just got to take that leap.
Yeah, and I feel like you'd be a really good person to talk to about that too. Eventually, if anybody wanted to talk to you about opening your own firm. So, did you like? Oh, we didn't really talk much about your background, but would you say you always had like an entrepreneurial spirit? Like, was there times like high school or like something where you were kind of like businessy, like you wanted to be doing your own thing, you didn't like to have a boss or something? I don't know.
Yeah, you could say that. I mean, I've had issues with authority, I guess, or I don't like
That's great.
answering to folks, I suppose.
Okay.
And I'm like probably most kids, like, I had lemonade stand or sold baseball cards and things like that. When I was in law school, in my mind, starting a firm was just super easy.
Okay.
And in my mind too, it's like, oh yeah, 1 year out of law school, I'll be able to start a catastrophic injury firm, like boom. And then then I started actually practicing law and realized that like one case can last 5 years. It's not
Right.
like, TV where you get a case and then, by the end of the week, you
Yeah.
get your $20 million and
Yeah.
justice is served, things like that. Um, so I realized, it's a much longer process, but I did always have in the back of my mind, the goal to have my own firm one day.
Yep. Makes sense. So why personal injury? Catastrophic personal injury. And you did
Sure.
mention to me like you're selective with cases. You're not going to just take any old case, you know. So like why personal injury though?
Sure. So going into law school, first, and when I went into law school, it's kind of weird. I basically always wanted to be a lawyer from age 5 to 18. And then when I got to college, it's kind of like, do I even really want to be a professional right now? If I was a lawyer, who would I help and things like that. I like the idea of being a lawyer. I thought I had the skill set to be a lawyer, and I was told I'd be a great lawyer, but who was I going to help? And I don't get me wrong, I think there are some good corporations out there, but definitely back in the day, I was very skeptical to all corporations and always thought that they pick on the little guy and
Okay.
get away with it. And it's like, well, I don't want to become a lawyer and help them.
Yep.
And so I always kind of thought like, well, it's probably unrealistic to say, well, I'm going to sue them and put them out of business.
Yeah.
That probably can't happen. But I always thought, I could maybe give them a wake up call and maybe
There
if
you go. There
make
you
some
go.
impact and some change. And that's what I would tell people, my first year of law school.
I mean, what did people were they like, wow, like you're thinking so far ahead? Because I really don't remember thinking like that in law school. Like,
Yeah. Well,
you
I
know,
don't know. I don't know if you took a break between college and law school.
one year. One
Okay.
year.
I took a few years off, so I had a little bit more
Okay.
an idea. I was a little bit more goal oriented when I
What did
was.
you do?
I just basically bummed around New
Okay.
York City. I was a
Okay.
bar back, a waiter,
Oh, cool.
have
That's awesome.
random jobs.
Okay.
I'd get a few $1,000s living in New York, and I would think I was rich. I was
Yeah,
like, "Wow,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
rich," and then I'd quit my job and just walk around and
Just
watch
walk
a lot
around.
of Netflix and read books.
Okay. All
So I
right.
had to find another job, but it gave me a lot
Well, you
of
got
different.
some reading in there, Jordan. I mean, that's important.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
All right.
Um, but yeah, so I always wanted to help people. I like the nature of going up against really big corporations. And the criminal stuff to me was actually a little bit too real because I always had concern, like, and I have a lot of respect for criminal attorneys, but I always had concern, like, well, if I'm a defense attorney, what if I get someone who's actually guilty off, or if I'm a
Yeah.
prosecutor and I actually convict someone who's innocent, it's like I don't want to deal with that.
Yep.
Um, so the civil side of things, catastrophic injury, not everybody deserves quality representation, but it is very difficult to handle a complex, high stakes, high value case when you're also handling 1,000 other smaller cases.
Sure. Yeah.
I always just wanted to focus on the complex matters with the highest stakes.
What do you think makes something so complex? Is it the causation?
Well, I mean, there's so many things. Every single aspect can be complex. And don't get me wrong, there can be cases that, maybe worth $10,000. That could be just as complex as a
Yeah,
case,
yep,
more complex in a case that's $10 million. Certainly, there are cases where causation can be, very complex. Also, it just depends the field or world you're in.
right.
Uh, don't get me wrong, car accident cases can be very complex depending on the circumstances, but typically, uh, a medical malpractice case, is a lot more complicated than
Sure,
your standard auto case. So you have to learn medicine, you have to deal
sure,
with, several types of experts. And the same thing is true with product liability
right.
cases. Um, and maybe your non-conventional car accident case, like trucking cases, can be complex.
Okay.
And there are other cases too where it could just require very complex investigation. Like the first lawsuit I actually ever filed when I started my firm was against the state police because they ran over a guy with a bulldozer.
Wow.
And for that case, I ended up deposing 25 people because there were so
Wow.
many witnesses and investigators. So that was very complex. And
Wow.
in that case too, I had to deal with about 6 experts in all these various specialties. So there are a lot of complexities, and sometimes it can be your
Yeah.
client who's complex, and it's your job as a trial attorney
Interesting.
to
Yeah.
really understand your client so you can tell your client's story at trial. So complexity all around.
So you just mentioned, trial attorney, right? So what's important to you about being like a good trial attorney and not just like referring a case, right? So, you want to take these cases to court. You're looking for these cases that, you're going to obviously cases settle, but you're not afraid to go in there and battle. So like what's so important to you about being a good advocate?
That's a great question, and being a trial lawyer is all I ever wanted to be. Like I would not be a lawyer if you couldn't go to trial.
Wow.
And maybe it's probably a few different factors why I want to be a trial lawyer or I am a trial lawyer. One thing could be sometimes I can be very introverted. I mean, I can also be
Okay.
very social. I have a lot of friends, but I'd be very introverted and I don't like stealing anyone's thunder, and I like being quiet and let people have their conversations and things like that. At trial, though, I do enjoy where it's like, okay, the spotlight's on you, like the floor is to you, like there's
Yeah.
nobody else talking, like it's your turn, like I can be free, and I can talk, and I can tell my client's story. And then also, I mean, man, it is, if you want to talk about a challenge and complexity, that's a trial, because from day one you get the case. If you're doing it right, you always have your mind towards trial. Some folks, they have their mind towards settlement. Oh, get what we need just so we can settle the case. But
Yep.
frankly, if you're always focusing on getting the case ready for trial, you'll always get the best settlement value. Because if you're not ready for trial, the other side essentially they have you, because you're going to have to
Right.
settle regardless, or else you're going to get crushed at trial. But
Right.
trial is a culmination of knowing the law cold. I mean, you have to know it by heart, like every single aspect of the law for your case. And on top of just like what the law is, of what you need to know to like meet the elements of your case, you also have to master civil procedure. You also have to master evidence. You have to be a good writer beforehand to frame the case right with motion practice. And then also to a certain degree, like you're a storyteller, and in a certain degree, you work within the confines of what you find in your investigation. So you're also like a private detective getting your case ready for trial. And then you take all the information you have, all the law you have, and you have to piece it together for a storyline that effectively tells your client's story so they can get justice. And then you have all these curveballs at
Yeah.
trial, what the defense might do, or what their experts or what their witnesses might say. And so you also have to have, you have to be mindful, you can't just be buried into your own game plan and stick to
Right,
it. You
right,
have to
right.
be observant of what's going on and pick up on what's going on. So there's a
Yeah,
lot of,
yeah.
emotional intelligence at play too. And then at the very end, after a full trial, all the blood, sweat, and tears that you've done advocating for your client from day one, then you get to look at just 12 people that live in your city, or 12 people in that area where the courthouse is, and you just keep it real, and you just tell them why,
Wow.
justice needs to be
Dude, that's an
delivered.
amazing description. Like, that's really, really cool
Thanks.
the
I,
way
I
you just
love
explained that.
I
Yeah,
love
you could tell the passion coming from you. Like, and when you talk about the law, you're talking about like, you might need to know like state statutes and regulations on top of like maybe recent case law. Is that how it's working?
Yeah, I mean, like, basically anything under the sun. Like,
Anything under the sun.
I if like, say for instance, if I have a medical malpractice case in advance of that trial, I'm literally reading basically every single medical malpractice case opinion that's available,
Wow.
all different issues. If there's an issue with, qualifying your expert, or there's an issue establishing liability, there's an issue with causation, an issue with damages. I'm just basically trying to think of any potential issue that could come up. So if it does come up, I already know the answer. Judge, this is the law. Or, if there's something I need to object to, I know the grounds that I can win my objection. Just basically try to think of every
What
single.
about AI? Isn't AI going to read all that stuff and break it down for you one day or what?
Who knows, maybe, but that's, AI might take some jobs in the profession, but
Yeah, that's true.
I'm thinking trial lawyers, we might be on the bottom of that
Yeah, I
list,
think you'll be
because
all right.
until
So
robots are in trial.
before we go back to your actual trials, that I know you've had some amazing victories, and I just want to go back to your law school for a moment at Widener. Of course, I can't get through this episode without congratulating you on being valedictorian like 10 years ago, right? So,
Yeah.
of your law school, which is incredible. And I watched some of your speech on your website. Like, you have the speech, awesome website, like you on there, and that was pretty amazing. So, congratulations on that. You really seemed. Were you even reading from a teleprompter or something? I mean, you were just speaking.
No, I had it memorized.
Yeah, that
That's
was
like,
unbelievable. That was, I
I
mean,
have
I
a
didn't see
decent
you
memory
looking at
for
anything.
topics.
You were just sort of like flowing. That was
Yeah. Yeah, I'm fortunate. Like, I don't have a photographic memory or anything like that, but I'm pretty good at, like, I can memorize things, and sometimes I don't need to look at notes, and I can talk for like 10 or 20 minutes.
wow,
Like,
that was great. Um, so tell us about your first trial.
right. So my first trial was a pro bono trial.
Nice.
This is the
Like,
only trial I had before I went out on my own. But basically, I was dying to do a trial, and where I worked, and to some degree, I guess it's proper. When you're handling only big cases, the cases that the law firm owners or the partners, they're the ones who are going to try the case.
yep.
So if I wanted to be a trial lawyer and I would work at firms where, they would try cases, I wasn't really getting those opportunities. And frankly, I didn't want to wait 10 years to try my first case. So I noticed that there was a program, um, basically, where you could volunteer in federal court to help a pro se prisoner in their civil rights cases. So there are cases that I guess judges would screen and be like, okay, well, there's a chance this could be a case. So let's get you that a prisoner would file on their own from jail.
Wow.
Like, let's set you up with an attorney. And I remember going through the list. It's probably a list of like 50 cases. And I found this one. I was like, wow, this guy already got past like a few stages of the case. It's actually relatively close to going to trial. And I convinced my one buddy, one of my best friends, like, hey, come do this with me. And so we cherry picked that case, took basically 2 depositions, and then we were ready for trial. And it was a case where, um, a man, essentially, some guy was out walking his dog, and this man, I think, is scared of dogs, and he had a gun on him. And so he actually showed his gun and said, hey, keep that dog away from me. The dog owner, was frightened by that, rightfully so, and called the police. And so the police find him, you know, freeze, stop, whatever. And the man starts running. and he throws the gun away, and he actually runs back to his house and goes in through the back door, and the police run in after him, and there's a bit of a scuffle, and he gets punched in the face at least once, and so it was an excessive force case.
Wow.
Should the police have punched him in the face, or was that excessive? So when I look back on it, I was like, it's basically an impossible case to win.
Yeah.
Because a cop is allowed to use some use of force when they're going into a random house for a person with a gun. But I mean, we put a lot of work into that, and we almost won the case.
Yeah.
It was my first time ever doing a cross examination. It was so fun, and we really enjoyed it. We had a really good client. He felt very satisfied. We didn't win the case. The jury deliberated for almost 2 full days. So we're like, oh wow, we might have a chance here. What are they deliberating for? But eventually they came back, and we didn't win. But the client, so this client, his whole life, he's been arrested, he's been in jail,
Yep.
and he had issues with police, right? They've always been, putting him in jail. And what I remember, which I thought was pretty interesting, is when the jury was deliberating, the officers who were on trial, they were very nervous. They were pacing the halls and things like that.
Yeah.
And our client was waiting in the courtroom, just sleeping like a baby. He was at peace. So I think he got that type of peace of mind, like, okay, like now that the tables are turned, like how do you the law coming for you? But it was a great experience, and it actually led to me bringing in some pretty big cases, because people hearing about that trial and that civil rights experience. I got a pretty big civil rights case as a result of it, and it just laid a foundation. I mean, anything, life experience would tell you, anything you do, once you do it for the first time, you're always exponentially better the second time you do it. So I had to volunteer my time and take time off to do the trial. But yeah, I look back, it was a priceless experience. It was great.
I love that. I love that. So that was your first case or your first trial?
That was my first trial.
Okay, so do you have a first case you want to tell us about?
My first case, which I briefly talked about before, when I started my firm, was a case against the state police where they ran over the guy with the bulldozer. So that was a pretty wild experience. And it's weird. I'm sure a lot of firm owners feel the same way, especially when you get started. Just how many times you just gotta put everything you have into a case, and basically put all of your money into a case. And it really, the amount of money and time I put into it, and I look back into it, it's not like I was going to make a ton of money in return. But it was just like all in. It's just like people were, a guy got ran over by a bulldozer. The local DA essentially said, no, the police did nothing wrong here. A couple firms looked into it, and they're like, well, if the DA says they didn't do anything wrong, we're not going to touch this case. And I looked at it and I was like, of course they did something wrong. They ran over a guy with a bulldozer. They tried to say, oh, this guy crawled underneath the back of a bulldozer. And I'm like, that's BS. Obviously he didn't, because no person in the right mind would ever crawl behind a moving bulldozer and crush themselves to death. I don't care what potential drugs you may or may not be on. It's not going to happen. And so that was, looking back, for that to be like my first case, like, yeah, it set the tempo of like, I'm in. Like, this is crazy. Like, I don't care about the money. Like, this has to be uncovered. It was a cover up. Like, it was crazy. Like, the amount of evidence that the police didn't look at or didn't preserve, and then they're just like, yeah, he must have crawled underneath the back. Like, just, I remember there was a helicopter pilot who actually witnessed the whole thing, and he's just like, this guy's laying down, and which, by the way, like, how crazy is that? A guy's, I didn't even tell you that. My apologies. The police were coming after him because he had like 10 marijuana plants out somewhere, and they sent like 15, armed law enforcement. They called in a helicopter. The helicopter found him, and the guys are walking towards him, and someone just had the brilliant idea to get on a bulldozer and like, oh, let's get to him with the bulldozer instead.
Wow.
Oh, see him anymore. Where could he be? And the helicopter pilot is like, yeah, I had eyes on him the whole time until the bulldozer stopped and I couldn't see him anymore. And I'm like, yeah, because the bulldozer ran him over. No,
Oh,
I didn't see that. That didn't happen. Well, what do you think happened? Like, no, that didn't happen. He was like 10 feet away from the bulldozer. And I was like, so you telling me this guy can teleport? And the officer goes, I don't know what he was capable of.
yeah.
Talking about. But that was a pretty wild story, and the family got a lot of closure
Okay.
by having there be a real investigation, a thorough investigation, showing them all the evidence I accumulated, and then getting relatively significant settlement, which shows that there's some culpability there
For
with the police.
sure. For sure. And then, you had another big case, speaking of, big cases, the one with the hospital, that, you got a big sum of money there for your client, and there was actually no appeal, right? No appeal, and you made some reform. I think it was the leg, you sued the hospital.
Yeah,
I don't know if
yeah,
you want to talk about that one a little bit.
sure. So that was actually my last trial.
Yep.
In a nutshell, it was a case of a young man uh, who was at a party in North Philadelphia. Some sort of scuffle broke out. He was kicked in the leg, and he immediately was just in intense pain. He couldn't move, couldn't walk, and he did the right thing. He went to the hospital right away. So he goes straight to the hospital, and sadly, he had a ruptured popliteal artery. So
Wow.
what that actually is like, so when he was kicked in the leg, or somehow, some way, his knee dislocated, which is serious in itself. But what's more serious is the popliteal artery is right behind the knee. And so oftentimes when it dislocates, it can transect or cut that artery. And that artery, gives blood, it gives oxygen, it
Yeah.
basically gives, the life into your leg. And
Sure.
so if that's cut, you gotta figure out that it's cut sooner than later, because if not, your leg's gonna die. And sadly, this man is in the hospital for hours upon hours in agony, and just mistake after mistake after mistake occurs. And they just fail to timely spot it and treat it. And then sadly, his leg was amputated, his
Wow.
life was wrecked as he knew it, his livelihood, his relationships, and he was going to be a dad, and I can't even imagine, your significant other being pregnant, and you're just there, in the
Yep.
prime of your life, and then you lose your leg, and you got to figure all that out. But essentially, for almost 5 years, the hospital denied any responsibility. I deposed the doctor, look him in the eye. Did you do anything wrong? No. Right.
Yeah.
And they're not offering any money. And they're basically threatening, hey, when we do offer you money, like, take it, or, we're going to drag your client's case out for years on appeal.
Right. Right. What they offer, like three?
Happens.
They offer like
Yeah,
three.
so eventually, yeah,
Yeah.
just before trial, they offered $3 million, and probably, especially, I hear a lot of people giving me feedback. A lot of people would have taken it,
Yep.
because $3 million in a lot of scenarios is a lot of money. It's, for a lot of lawyers, that would be the best settlement of their life, or it'd be the most money they've ever seen. But, me, and I urge anyone, you can't really think like that. You have to think, does the settlement amount, actually give you a just amount? Is it actually fair under
Sure.
circumstances? And it just wasn't. And my client definitely agreed that 3 million wasn't going to do it. So we had no choice. We tried the case, and I tried it by myself, and the jury came back with a verdict of $26 million.
Wow. How long
And
did they take to deliberate?
um, so I think they deliberated a little bit in an afternoon. Then they came back the following morning, and then right after lunch,
Yeah.
it was done. So it wasn't too long, and then immediately, that's just like, it's almost like kind of blowing up the Death Star.
If you didn't have lunch already, would you got another seafood tower or what?
Who knows? Well, I didn't have the seafood tower this time around. That was, yeah, the seafood tower. That was a one-time thing when I
Okay.
said
All right.
the
So
first good settlement. But anyway,
right.
so the 26 million verdict comes in, and even some top trial lawyers were approaching me, great job. Hopefully, now that you have this verdict, they'll settle for a good amount. And in my mind, it's just like, what do you mean what do you mean settle? Because I guess a lot of times when you get a big verdict, either it gets appealed and reversed, or you settle it for a discount of what the actual number is. But this was a clean trial. Like everything was proper. Like this, I didn't do anything wrong. I didn't break any rules, right? We played fair. The jury delivered a just and fair verdict. Like, why are we going
Yeah,
to
why would that
appeal?
happen? Why would they like lower why would you get a
Well,
different?
they like to try to threaten you. Well, in a lot, well, maybe sometimes there are, like, maybe sometimes, somebody may, or something might happen, which could be in a gray area where it's like, hey, the court might reverse this. You might have to do this over again. But this was just solidly clean all around. But still, after the verdict, they enlisted two well-known, prestigious law firms to
Right,
join
that's right.
the battle. So there are now three law firms against little old me. And they raised some arguments to try to get the verdict reduced. And I remember I went to oral argument to, you know, where they're trying to claim that, this verdict's excessive, you need to reduce it. And I walk into the courtroom by myself for oral argument, and they brought like 20 people. There were like a dozen attorneys. There were probably close to 10 hospital executives, so many suits. I've never seen so many people stare at me, all like 20. Like imagine walking into a room and then you just see 20 people in suits, and they're all just like, it's all
Yeah,
just
yeah.
quiet, and they're all just staring at you. If a part of me wanted to like get out and take a selfie, but I'm
Yeah,
not.
you should have.
I'm not like that. But in my mind, I was like, wow. And I'm like, and then I was kind of thinking, I was like, this is cool. Like, this is why I became a lawyer, like to go up
Yeah.
against big corporations that think that they can just pack a courtroom with 20 suits and just, oh, justice is just going to get
Intimidate
reversed.
you, right? Like
Yeah.
intimidate you. Yeah.
And fortunately, the judge had nothing, for them. And, the verdict was upheld. And then once the judge basically gave him a smackdown, like, what are you guys doing? Like, this is disingenuous. Like, you lost fair and square. Immediately, they were just like, all right, we're not going to appeal. We're not going to take this to the next level. We're going to pay you, or pay your client. It's like, wow, that like never happens. And then,
How long does it take to get paid
um,
for the client?
sure. Well, they took care of it within a few months,
Okay.
and they publicly announced that they were going to make some systemic reforms on how they handle medical malpractice cases. So I'd like to think that
It's
there are
amazing.
other victims of malpractice out there that are going to benefit from this result.
That's amazing.
It was pretty cool.
Attorney Strokovsky, congratulations on that one.
Yeah.
That's wicked
Thank you.
cool.
Thank you.
So like, what? So you just sort of mentioned it. Like you had this $3 million that you could have. That's pretty big for a young lawyer. Like getting a chunk of that, and like for your. But okay, it's not going to cover, or your client didn't think it was enough. But you did mention in another one of your LinkedIn posts about a month ago. You said that money doesn't drive you. Like,
Yeah.
does that have something to do with it? Like, not just settling on the 3 mil?
Yeah, money does not drive me. Don't get me wrong. I don't. I like money. Money's cool.
Yeah,
But no, it doesn't. All I really care about is just getting the best possible result, getting the righteous and just result. And in this case, like $3 million was not justice. It was frankly, as if granted, a lot of people don't know the facts of the case and the circumstances.
right,
I thought it was degrading. I know a lot of people would have been like, wow, this is great. But I thought it was degrading. And sadly, you see situations where people take that type of money,
right,
or you might, and a lot of times it's just people who've never seen a result like that. So they're people who, maybe they just handle cases that settle for $50,000, and they might have a case that's worth $5 million, and they don't know it's worth $5 million, and they get offered 200,000, and it's like, wow, I'm gonna take it, 200,000. Like
right,
that's
right,
best settlement I've had all year.
right,
Um, but you really just got to try to be, or I try to be unbiased. I look at the case on both sides, and then you really just got to think, what do you think a jury would award? And here, 3 million in my mind was so far from what was reasonable. it wasn't even like a tough choice. I know a lot of folks have been like, no, that is a tough choice. It's $3 million. Like, that's a lot of money. But I just really thought it was a smack in the face and degrading. And my
Yeah,
client agreed.
that's great. I mean, that you kept pursuing it. I think that's amazing for something for you to do for your client. So Philly has a few well-known law firms. They've been around for decades. So tell us why the catastrophically injured victim should go with you over them.
That's a great question. And you're right, Philly does have some really well established firms. Like there are probably a few firms that they've been around since before I was born, where the owners and the partners have been practicing law since before I was born. And like they're awesome attorneys, right? They're legends. Like there are people when I was in law school, like I would, Google them and like look at all their results and,
Really? Wow.
aspire to be like them,
Yeah.
right? So I have
Yep.
a ton of respect for those firms. And some of them, they have like 40 attorneys, and they, I don't even want to think about how much money they have in the bank, after being successful for decades. But I think the advantage I have over them is kind of what we talked about at the beginning is I'm hungry.
Yep.
I'm so hungry. And I don't have thousands of cases and I don't want thousands of cases. And don't get me wrong, they're going to get good results. And they do get good results. And they do have a name and they have a track record of getting good results. And they have good associates. And these probably the associates who are going to be handling the case for at least most of the time. And then maybe the firm owner will take the case to trial, or maybe the associates or a lower level partner will take the case to trial, and they'll probably do a good job. But with me, I'm just trying to make the most of, or make the best of every single opportunity. And I think it's a rare situation where you can say that the firm owner is also the trial attorney on your case and is also the person who's like talking to you right from the beginning, who's
Right.
meeting with you when you're grieving, and who's really, going to your home or meeting you at a diner and like wanting to know your story, being there for you, late at night if there's something on your mind, and like having that relationship for several years, and then also doing every single part of the case and the investigation and talking to the experts. So even though there are, some very well established firms that can get good results, I'm putting everything I have into a case. And so while they're getting good results, which is great, I'm trying to do better than that. I'm really
Yep.
trying to do something special with every
Yep.
single case that I have.
That's awesome. That's amazing. That's, that you have a lot of faith in yourself, a lot of confidence, and that's good. That's what people want in an attorney, like when they're in their most vulnerable time, to turn it over to you and know that somebody's not going to just work mediocre on it, but they're really going to go put their all into it, because they're not working on a million cases. They might have a few significant cases, like a reasonable caseload, right? So is there anything else that you're working on now that you'd like to share about?
I don't like talking too much about like current cases.
That's fine.
But I'm, like I said, I'm a catastrophic wrongful death attorney. And a lot of people go, well, what does that really mean? Because you can say that and maybe only handle one type of cases, like, well, maybe you just handle car accident cases, and things like that. But I really have a diverse caseload of catastrophic injury. So, I represent in maybe the most tragic fire or catastrophe ever in Philadelphia history. A couple years ago, sadly, um, a lot of folks died in a fire, and I'm one of the few attorneys, representing them to hopefully get them justice and get some accountability. I have cases involving explosions or plane crashes and
Wow.
medical malpractice and birth injuries and deceased children and babies,
Oh,
which is always
jeez.
difficult, and clients who are paralyzed, gunshot victims, negligent security cases, civil rights cases, sex abuse
Man, I
cases.
thought you didn't
I
have that
see a
many
lot.
cases.
I see a lot. That's fair. I do. I'm quite busy, but I don't have that many cases.
Are
I
you
always
working with anybody?
uh I have an associate I hired
Okay.
earlier this year, and I have a staff.
Congrats. Okay.
So I plan to slowly grow. Again, I'm not looking towards. I don't want to have 1,000 cases, and
Yeah.
I don't know if people like this, but I decline a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Even I decline cases that I know I could make money off of because, again, money doesn't drive me.
Yeah.
So some people would rather give me 1,000 cases. I don't care if I don't get, the A+ value for it, because even if I get a C+ value on 1,000 cases, I'm gonna have a ton of money at the end of the day. Where me, like, I feel sick. Like, it's weird. Like, I would feel sick to my stomach if I didn't do my best on a case.
Yeah.
So I always make sure that I have enough on where I have enough spare time, where if I get a call and there's an emergency or there's something I'm very passionate about, a case that I very much want to work on, I'm able to drop everything and handle that case. So
Gotcha.
I
Okay.
know it seems like I have a lot going on. I certainly do, but I definitely try to keep my caseload as lean as
Yeah.
possible.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you'd be surprised. There are folks
That's. I think
on a
that's a
lot
good.
more
That's a
cases
good.
than me.
I think that's a good way to put it. Keep your caseload lean. I like that. That's awesome. Is there anything else you wanted to tell the Lawyer Stories community today? Did we cover everything, or did you? Is there something else we missed?
You tell me if you think we're good, we're good. I mean, you're the lawyer stories expert.
Well, I mean,
Um,
no. I mean, I think we covered a lot.
yeah, no, it's been great.
You went to a fur ball a few weeks ago. Like that was
Oh yeah,
cool. So
yeah,
you're a man for the animals, which is
I
awesome.
do. Yeah, that's funny. So I handled a couple cases where it's very sad cases where dogs died, right? And what was the reason I say it's the one funny aspect of that is everybody started thinking that I was an animal lawyer, not a
Oh
personal
yeah,
injury lawyer. So
right.
like basically, I was approached like, hey, the first time, it's a few years ago, hey, our dog died at a doggy daycare. And I'm like, what happened? Like, well, the dog somehow escaped and got onto the road and got run over by a car. And I'm like, oh my God, like that's horrible. And I had a puppy at the time. Like, it's just
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
wow, if that happened to my puppy, I'd be heartbroken. I'd be
Oh
so,
yeah. Oh yeah.
and everybody's just telling us like that a dog is only worth, like $100. It's just whatever you paid for it at the shelter. And technically in Pennsylvania, at least, and probably most states, if not all states, that's actually true. Like, animals are regarded as property. And so property's like, well, you get a dog at a shelter,
Yeah.
you got it for free, or maybe you paid $50 to give it a shot. Like, that's what it's worth. And they're like, so who do you like? We know you don't do this, but like, who do you think can help? And I'm like, nobody's gonna help.
Yeah.
So it's like, I'm gonna help. Right. And so I was just like, I'm gonna I'm gonna do it. It's the right thing. And a lot of people like laughed at me. Like, why are you doing that? And I did it because I felt like it was the right thing to do. And I ended up proving that no, you're gonna dogs are not just worth $100. I can't disclose what the settlement was, but I proved that, and
Nice.
I think I got them a lot of closure. But yeah, the inconvenient
I'd
part.
like. I'd be curious, honestly, to know, like, not really the. I mean, obviously the settlement, which you don't want to say, but like the argument that you used behind that.
Sure. So this is a while ago. But I alleged like consumer fraud. So that's a way to kind of get treble damages or attorney's fee. I alleged punitive damages. And then plus, I was willing to kind of make this novel argument that A, it shouldn't be considered as property, but B, if it is property, then think of it as like a priceless type of property. Just because you buy something for $100 doesn't mean it's actually worth $100. It has
Yeah.
this, very much sentimental, real value to you that's worth a heck of a lot more. Um,
I
but
don't
yeah,
know,
but
man.
afterwards I started getting calls being like,
Yeah.
"Oh, hey, a dog died. Will you help us?" Or someone got hurt at the vet. Will you help us? And don't get me wrong. I took on a couple more cases to help, and I would always, whatever money I would make, I would just donate it to
Nice.
animal shelters and things like that. But for a while, like, you get a call from people and you're like, oh, they got a case for me, and it's like, oh no, it's an animal case. It's like,
Yeah.
guys, I was just
You're gonna be
doing
like
this.
cited now, like
I
across
was like,
state lines.
I'm just doing this for volunteer work. I was just doing it to be nice. Like, I'm not a dog lawyer.
That's
Like,
awesome. You're gonna be cited like in terms like your work is gonna be used as precedent like across state lines, like those arguments and stuff.
I hope more people take on wrongful death dog cases or
Death.
any pet case.
Yeah. Consumer
I hope that I can start something there.
That's awesome. Jordan Strokovsky, thank you like for your time, man. Like awesome job with everything, really. Like congrats on all your success. And it's been a pleasure to have you on.
It's been an honor to be on, and congrats with all your success.
Thanks,
I
man.
love watch what you're doing, and again, I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, of course.
In person one day.
Oh, we will. Stay right there. Everybody else, thanks for tuning in. Wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves.